各位来宾您好，欢迎莅临中华民国105年10月29日由国立交通大学科技法律学院主办，卫生福利部食品药物管理署指导的全球食品安全治理风险沟通策略国际研讨会暨跨领域座谈会。Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to 2016 International Conference and Seminar on Risk Communication Strategies in Global Food Safety Governance, which is hosted by School of Law, National Jiao Tong University, and supervised by Food and Drug Administration, Ministry of Health and Welfare. 首先为大家介绍今天的3位开幕贵宾，很荣幸邀请到卫生福利部食品药物管理署林金富副署长，与国立交通大学科技法律学院刘尚志院长，以及国立交通大学科技法律学院倪桂荣教授。担任本次研讨会的开幕致辞贵宾 ，It's our pleasure and honor to invite Deputy Director of Food and Drug Administration, Ministry of Health and Welfare, 林金富。Dean of School of Law, National Jiao Tong University, Dr. Liu Shangzhi, and Professor of School of Law, National Jiao Tong University, Ni Guirong, to give the opening remarks. 首先，让我们以热烈的掌声欢迎开幕致辞贵宾刘尚志院长为我们致辞。
各位亲爱的朋友，大家早安。好。今天很感谢林副署长 Mr. Massaro from Europe and 还有我们倪桂荣教授主持这次的计划。那么食品安全呢，在台湾已经不是第一天的事情了。可是食品安全关涉到政府公权力的行使、民间企业的财产权跟老百姓的生命安全。所以过去几十年来，台湾在食品安全方面似乎都让政府的公权力单方面的主导，做宣示性的工作。可是随着美牛事件的风波，很多的有毒的食品在市面上流窜。昨天我们看到联合报第一版呢，就是中国进口的东西里面呢有这个农药，而且农药的残留物呢可以至少达5年以上。所以从这个观点来看呢，食品安全当然是我们非常重要的一个课题。可是食品安全要沟通这件事情又是另外一个议题，因为它不只是政府的政令宣导，特别牵涉到民间团体有没有力量监督，那民间团体怎么样来参与。我个人在参加交通大学科技法律学院以前呢，其实我曾经在中山科学研究院核能研究所工作过7年，我是科技出身，后来转念法律。那么我在核能单位工作的时候，核能就开始做了风险评估 （probabilistic risk assessment）。那么核能的风险评估呢，严格说起来，从核能界来看呢，是非常完整的。他们也觉得，基本上要发生核能事故大概用俗话讲，100万分之一，1000万分之一。但是我们看到核能事故里面，曾经发生过最严重的3个国家呢，一个苏联，一个美国，一个日本，3个全世界科技最先进的国家，他们发生了最严重的核能事故。所以政府所做的风险评估，政府所控制的风险，到底能不能取得人民的信任，是一个严重的问题。而这个严重的问题呢，在今天我们进入新的民主时代，那么各位如果在宪法里面，在民主政治里面所听到的，这是审议式的民主开始。所谓审议式的民主，就是它需要不断的沟通跟不断的协商。那么在台湾今天的法律社会里面呢，有没有办法做到这一点呢？严格说起来，我们也很担心。那我们今天特别请的从欧盟来的律师，他也许可以跟我们分享一下欧盟分享在经验跟风险评估过程的一些经验。但是呢，台湾在走向公民社会当中我们事实上呢，距离一个良好的法律文化还有很多需要学习的地方。那么不可避免的，我们也常常在很多公共的议题呢，成为政治角力的一个工具。所以今天的风险的沟通不但代表了它是法律的议题，它也代表了是个政治议题，更重要的，它代表了全民所关切的生命的议题。这些都告诉我们呢，严格说起来， 要参与这样的活动呢，它是需要非常慎重的，而且怎么样在现有的法制情况之下来进行设计，恐怕也不只是用寄受欧陆法或寄受美国法就可以轻易解决的。因此呢，我们今天看到这么多的朋友呢来到这个地方参与这个活动啊，那么我个人呢非常高兴，也非常感谢食药署呢一再支持交通大学科技法律学院来参与这个计划。在倪桂荣老师的带领之下呢，今年已经是第3年了。那么我们随着时间的改进呢，我们不但在专业知识上，那么交通大学科技法律学院里面没有人是念食品的，虽然我们学生里面有一组的学生是从非法律背景来的，但是呢，对于食品的安全的问题啊，我们也希望各位呢能够给我们比较好的指教，让这个议题呢在台湾境内呢，在我们台湾跟国际上接轨的过程当中呢，台湾变成一个食品安全做得非常完善的地方。谢谢各位，再一次欢迎各位来参加今天的研讨会，谢谢。
非常感谢刘院长的支持与期许 ，Thank you, Dean Liu, for your splendid opening。接着，让我们以热烈的掌声欢迎大会贵宾林金富副署长为我们致辞。
刘院长、倪教授，还有我们今天的欧盟来的讲座，还有我们3办的主任修老师也在现场哦，还有我的老长官，现在应该叫康院长哈，谢谢您今天也拨冗来到现场，还有我们台湾大学的张正明教授，还有我们薛教授，还有差我1个字啦哈，这个林教授啊，我一直想要当林教授，不过一直没机会的，谢谢。还有我们这个不管在维护消费者的这个权益上面，还有帮我们做很多消费者沟通的这个我们赖小芬董事长，还有与会的各位关心我们食品安全的好朋友们，大家早安。早。谢谢大家今天牺牲这个假日跟家人相处的时间，我们齐聚一堂来关心食品安全。我跟大家报告啊，应该是我们来谢谢交通大学才对啊。刚院长特别提到3年来的合作，让我们在这个风险沟通上面本来是政府最弱的一环，能够大步的前进。那也感谢我们立法院我们这个也是讲座之一了哈。我们的这个食安立委吴科玉委员今天也会来到会场，来跟大家一起来讨论所谓的食品安全。我们都知道，其实食品这个安全的工作呢，非常的复杂，尤其在风险评估上面这是以往我们被很多消费者团体所诟病的，因为我们风险的评估跟风险的管理都是由我们食药署来做。那目前在这个行政院的指导之下，食安办也在努力要来把这个风险评估跟风险管理的工作能够怎么样把它分开来，让一个客观独立、基于科学的基础上面的风险评估工作能够取信于民。我相信我们食药署也责无旁贷，会把风险评估、风险管理还有风险沟通的工作努力来做好。那今天这一个就是一个风险沟通的场合，希望各位与会的贵宾、关心食安议题的好朋友们，都能够不吝给我们食药署很多的指教，让我们在食安的工作上能够扎根做好，也借由这样一个跟民众沟通的机会，让业者发声，让民众参与，让所有的资讯能够更透明公开，是我们的目标。希望让我们一起来努力，为台湾这个美食王国的招牌来努力。谢谢，谢谢大家。
非常感谢林副署长的支持与祝福。Thank you, Mr. Lin, and thanks for the support from Food and Drug Administration. 接下来，让我们以热烈掌声欢迎大会贵宾倪桂荣教授为我们致辞。
也都来的欢迎那个Sarah, thank you for your coming. It's a very long drive for you, very good. 我们在过去看到我们整个的食安的一个治理环境在过去两年透过政府的努力民间的参与，确实有一些进步那接下来的工作其实就是要从各界的角度去思考，如何去建立 更为完善的风险分析体系啊。那刚才不管是院长或是署长已经都提到，我们准备要建立一个非常独立的一个风险评估的体系，然后风险管理要基于以科学为基础的一个决策过程啊。那另外一个议题就是今天我们要讨论的重点，如何在风险评估跟风险管理的过程里面，让各界的利害关系人包括这个民间团体、产业，还有甚至是国安业者，都有机会能够分享这些相关的资讯，以及如何去有效的把他们的观点反映给决策者啊。这也就是我们今天举办风险沟通研讨会的目的。那大家也知道，其实，在欧洲的这方面的实践跟经验，确实比台湾要丰富许多。当然，我们没有办法去完全的继受啊，但是从国外的经验里面，可以学习到，到底在建立一个好的风险沟通体系里面，应该要注意到哪些事情。那所以我们今天在上午场呢，主要是邀请到欧洲的学者跟律师呢，就他们欧洲管制的经验，来跟各界做一个分享。那接下来下午场呢，我们也非常荣幸的邀请相关的利害关系人包括民间团体、业界食品公司，还有学者一起来参与对不起，还有媒体媒体代表，我们来参与这个风险沟通的过程就是到底我们这个相关的利害关系人在这过程中应该扮演什么样的角色，他们的希望获得的资讯，以及如何去传达他们的想法。能够有一个交流沟通的机会，所以我们这个上午的经验分享，下午的国内相关的利害关系做交流，这是我们今天主要的内容。那同时我们也特别感谢我们交大学的刘院长一直在支持我们这跨领域的学习，因为我们交大学主要就是希望能够通过很多的教学研究呢，把科学、科技、法律跟政策能做有效的结合交流这是我们交大主要的发展的一个目标那也再次感谢福药食药署能够支持这样相关活动其实我最感谢是各位的参与的来宾你们的到来让我们这个活动真的是有机会扩大这个影响力希望各位能够好好的享受今天的活动谢谢大家谢谢。
非常感谢倪教授的支持与勉励。Thank you, Professor Ni, for your inspiring remarks. 感谢3位贵宾的莅临，让我们再次以热烈的掌声感谢大会贵宾。演讲即将于1分钟后开始。The first session will begin in 1 minute. Please be seated. Thank you. 全球食品安全治理风险沟通策略国际研讨会正式开始。Now begins the international conference. It's our great pleasure and honor to welcome Professor Ni Guirong from School of Law, National Jiao Tong University, to be our moderator. We have 2 topics in this session. The first topic is Foundations of Risk Regulation. It's our great honor to have Professor Alberto Hermano, which is Professor of Law in HEC Paris, and Jim Monnet, Professor of EU Law and Risk Regulation, to be our first presenter. Unfortunately, Professor Hermano could not be with us in person today. Let's look forward to his presentation in video. The second topic is EFSA Risk Communication Guidelines and Companies' Communication Strategies During Crisis. It's our great pleasure and honor to welcome Mr. Cesare Verano, which is independent food lawyer and Vice President of Business and Regulatory Affairs EU at Inscatec, to be our distinguished speaker. Now let's first put our hands together to invite our moderator, Professor Ni, to give us the opening introduction.
It's time for this session English only. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome you to join this panel discussion. As you know, the modern food technology brings us a lot of benefit, especially to ensure food security by GM food. However, during the process, you can see that it also carries some risk. So the most challenging thing facing the current governments is how to ensure the risk analysis system has been fairly established and operated. As you know, the risk analysis system includes three elements: risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. Today, it's my pleasure to have two distinguished speakers. The first speaker is Professor Alberto Romano. Fortunately, given his very tight schedule, he won't be able to come here. However, he prepared some videotape. His main topic is the foundation of risk regulation. He will give you some basic idea. What's the elements? What's the main issue about risk regulations? And also, of course, he's going to share some of his observation about how the process should be operated to ensure the whole system can be acceptable to the general public. All right, so shall we show this videotape?
which is to contextualize food law within a broader discipline, which is emerging today. Food law and risk regulation. Here you are. This is the structure of the presentation. That's what I would like to talk about you, which is to contextualize food law within a broader discipline, which is emerging today, and which exists both in the United States and in Europe, which is risk regulation, that we will define together during the next slides. Regulations, not only curative medicines and doctors, might indeed reduce risks and save lives. This seems to be the manifesto of European risk regulation today. Let's have a look at the genesis of European risk regulation. We mentioned many reasons behind such a regulatory move, and I try to list most of these reasons in this slide. But as you might have guessed already, the European legislator, while regulating risk activities, finds itself in a very difficult situation, because on the one side, its own competence lies on the free movement imperative. He has to act in order to eliminate the obstacles existing among European countries, notably vis-à-vis technical standards, and on the other side, it lies and it actually draws its legitimacy in consumer protection goals. So it's important to strike the balance between free trade on one side and public health for consumer protection on the other. In order to face such challenge and to address such challenge, the European legislator decided slowly and progressively to embrace risk analysis as the ground norm of its own regime. As you might know, risk analysis was originally conceived by the US National Research Council, notably in the Red Book in 1984, as an analytical methodology which could guide decision makers when adopting decisions about hazards to human health, welfare, and environment. And there are three main steps in risk analysis: risk assessment, risk management, risk communication. And of course, it's very sensitive to define what consists each step and what is not, and also what is the relationship existing among these steps. So what I would like to do is to describe, or at least to provide you some background on the way in which each of these risk analysis steps have been conceived and developed and implemented at the European level. So it's one of the possible ways to portray the risk analysis paradigm. The risk analysis paradigm in reality has been subject to changes. So the risk analysis model, which was developed originally in the so-called Red Book, and you can see from this picture why it is called Red Book, has been changing during the last years. And with the Orange Book in 1996, the risk analysis paradigm has been changing, and more interactions between risk assessors and risk managers, and more transparency has been actually promoted as one of the possible developments. But many other changes have developed, and the last National Research Council report came out, I think, in 2008, in this title is Science and Decisions, and it's a very good reading, and is an effort in updating the way in which the risk analysis part should be developed across different policies, even if the main area analyzed in this report is environmental law and environmental policy. So these are some of the trends that existed also at the European level. The first study group report made by the Royal Society in the UK was finally modified once more in 1992 in the publication you can see. So both the EU and the US developments in risk analysis, of course, shape the debate. The risk assessment, it is not as such foreseen in the European treaties, so it is not in our primary law. Primary law does not impose scientific requirements to substantiate regulatory measures. But historically, as many member states began invoking public health reasons in order to justify some of their regulatory standards, which might have some trade restrictive effects, the European Court of Justice introduced a de facto risk assessment duty. And we have several examples, and probably the most important one relates to this German beer case, where Germany tried to persuade the European Court of Justice that the reason why it didn't want to allow the marketing of Belgian or UK beers was very much related to the fact that in Germany, consumers were not used to drink beer containing additives, and you could only market beers which did not contain additives. This duty of coming up with a risk assessment was then extended from the member states to the European Union itself. So in Angelo Farm, the European Court of Justice struck down a European regulations banning the marketing of a hair loss tonic because of a lack of a scientific assessment. So risk assessment has been turned from an anti-protectionist tool used to fight member states' protectionism to a methodology aimed at ensuring scientific rationality at both the European and national level. And this risk assessment duty has been codified as a possible way to denationalize risk assessment. And we have some traces in the treaty. In secondary law, risk assessment has become a duty in virtually all sectoral legislation ranging from genetically modified organisms or enzymes or contact food material legislation. Risk assessment has become a horizontal duty. I like to quote this Felix Frankfurter statement that says that responsibility of those who exercise power in democratic society is not to reflect inflamed public feeling, but to help form its understanding. So this idea of, yes, following consumer concerns, but only partly. And risk assessment somehow aims at implementing this idea of more understanding in order to help the policymakers to finally take a decision which is evidence-based. Who, when, and how, and by whom risk assessment is made in Europe. The introduction of risk assessment as a duty has been inserted at the primary level, so it is in the treaty, but its execution is left to secondary law, I just mentioned, in the sectoral legislation, and it is there that the food safety entrusts the European Food Safety Authority with such a specific task. These risk regulations, they've developed for time, and they did not necessarily share exactly the same risk analysis model. So we have some different and slight changes in the way in which the risk analysis paradigm has been developed. So for instance, in the food safety, in the area of food safety, there's a strict separation between risk assessment and risk management. This separation is not only functional, but is also institutional. The European Food Safety Authority does the science, and the European Commission and the European institutions take the political decision. If we look, for instance, at the pharmaceutical sector, such a strict separation is not so strict. In the European Chemical Agency, we had a very sophisticated framework which was implemented a couple of years ago, where socioeconomic factors may be taken into account at the risk management level after that risk assessment has been conducted by the agency or has been reviewed by the agencies. Who conducts risk assessment? Usually the scientists, the experts within these bodies. We don't really have a common approach to risk assessment, even if many efforts have been made to somehow harmonize the way in which risk assessment is conducted across policy areas. And we have a lack of a common source of advice, because as I mentioned earlier, we have different agencies, different scientific committees. And most of these scientific committees used to be within the executive, and now they've been rendered independent, and they animate the different agencies. And then we have still some non-food committees within the Commission's walls, which advise and provide advice to the European decision-making process. And then we have advisory agencies, we have some outsourcing, we have national reports by the member states advisory bodies, and then we have a joint research center, which is the main source of scientific advice made in laboratory, which is in Istra, Italy. Which are the elements of risk assessment? You might be familiar with the idea that risk assessment might be divided in four main steps: hazard identification, dose response assessment, and exposure assessment, and risk characterizations. Let's start from the first step. If you want to conduct a risk assessment, we have to identify the hazard, and the hazard is the source of a possible potential risk. Is the agent capable of eliciting an adverse reaction at some dose? This is the question we ask in a hazard identification. And once we answer that yes, it is the case, and we have identified the hazard, we will have to engage into a dose response assessment and try to look at how the degree of exposure to a certain substance affect the incidence of an input. What is the expected magnitude or probability of the adverse reaction at different doses? And then we will have to construct a dose response function by using both axes x and y, and try to see on the x axis to put the dose and to put the response on the y-axis, and trying to see what kind of curve we're going to draw. It's going to be a linear curve. It's going to be a curve that allows us to define that there exists a threshold and that the response, it is triggered only at certain doses. We might rely, of course, in epidemiological studies. These are studies conducted on past human exposure, but the main challenge there is variability. And that's why I'm talking about the areas of risk assessment. What is variability? We have to take into account that even studies conducted on humans have to take into account the variability, the fact that we are different and different organisms have different reactions. And this, of course, is even more visible in toxicological studies, where we might have differences in the reaction between species. So we might register some adverse effect towards a certain substance in rats, but we might record or get a different answer when the same test is conducted in mice. This is the notion of variability. And then another important notion which introduces some uncertainty is the fact that when we conduct studies on animal laboratories, we have to extrapolate our findings to human and to possible human reactions. And in order to do this, scientists tend to introduce many scientific uncertainty factors in order to make sure that the final magic number that will come out, which might be a reference dosage or maybe a threshold, really represents a viable number which is already representing some conservative consideration. So the final step is risk characterization, and this is the step in which this magic number has to be identified. Please keep in mind the first principle of toxicology all the time. All substances are poisons, and there's none which is not a poison. The right dose differentiates a poison and not poison. Paracelsus is considered to be the founding father of toxicology. Is this a viable way to adopt a risk management decision? Not really. To simply express uncertainty, which might be linked to variability, does not really discharge the policymaker for taking decisions. Please consider that also in the European Union, similar to the United States or Canada, regulatory impact assessment is today mandated for any legislative action. We call it not CPA as such, we call it regulatory impact assessment. And we do it for all secondary legislation proposals. And it consists in a problem identification, comparison and analysis of options, definition of objectives, monitoring and evaluation, and then development of policy options. And this helps, of course, the regulators. To make a very long story short, keep in mind that in the European Union, we have only one institution who might initiate legislation. It is our executive body, which is called European Commission, which is made of independent commissioners, which have been, yes, nominated by the member states, but once they've been nominated, they, in principle, can't any link to their country of origin. But the real legislator is represented by the European Parliament and the Council. They co-legislate together under the so-called ordinary procedure, and finally the implementation of the law is left to the member states. We have a lot of better regulation activities today. The European decision-making process has to be streamlined, And the idea is to intervene on both existing legislation and new initiative by doing what? Evaluating, simplifying, and also cutting the administrative burden. On the new initiative, the main tool is regulatory impact assessment. We are learning step by step, so in 2002 we introduced regulatory impact assessment and some revised guidelines entered into force in 2008, and a regulatory oversight body has been created. It reminds us very much the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs in the United States. It has been created under the Commission President Barroso, and is made the impact assessment board of 5 high officials who have to check the quality of regulatory impact assessment which are conducted at the European level. So these are some of the features and some of the numbers of the way in which impact assessment is done. It is not really mandated by the law, it is simply soft law, so it's recommended, and you cannot challenge a legislation simply because it lacks a regulatory impact assessment, but most of the times this regulatory impact assessment, it is done today. What kind of substantive test it is done? As I said, it's not pure CBA, it is not pure cost effectiveness, it is an integrated approach where all the possible impact on the social dimension, environmental dimension, the economic dimension are taken into account, and the risk is considered in all these 3 dimensions. And finally, the impact assessment has to be presented into a report, which is a self-standing document of maximum 30 pages. It follows a standard format. It doesn't contain any technical language in order to allow stakeholders to have comments on it, according to the lines of the so-called public notice and comment procedure in the United States. The Impact Assessment Board that I just mentioned has been empowered with the authority to send back, in a way similar to the so-called return letters at OIRA, those proposals who do not fit with the guidelines. Closing the cycle, this is the idea. You initiate legislation by the Commission, you legislate, you implement, and then you evaluate. So there's a lot of importance also in the so-called ex post control. You can find more information about the better regulation agenda and notably on impact assessment on these specific links of the European institutions. What about the role of public consultation in defining and managing risk? At least since 2002, the EU has engaged into an important exercise which consists in defining a minimum standard for consultation, enabling any stakeholder into the legislative process, at least at the very first stages. I like this quote. It's taken by Stephen Breyer, Breaking the Vicious Circle, when it refers to this issue that very often institutions have to face, which consists in tunnel vision, a classic administrative disease, which arises when an agency so organizes or subdivides its tasks that each employee's individual conscientious performance effectively carries single-minded pursuit of a single goal too far, to the point where it brings about more harm than good. It's always important to keep in mind this when doing institutional design or only institutional analysis and looking how the different institutions carries this task. Risk communication is the final task of the risk analysis, and in the EU also risk communication is split between EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, and the European Commission, and this is a nice story that shows how difficult it is sometimes to split between the two functions. Following the publication of a scientific opinion conducted by EFSA on avian flu in 2005, the European Food Safety Acting Directive declared that we don't have any evidence that the food virus can be transmitted through food, but we can't exclude it either. And then, instead of stopping there by simply saying what the science was, he decided to also provide some risk management recommendation. And in doing so, he encroach upon the competence of the European Commission. What about the judicial review of science-based measure? The rationale is to ensure, of course, the legality of the regulation and the final arbiter of whether the risks are being managed according to the laws that society has set out for the purpose. This is the main rationale of judicial review. So what is the standard, which is the intensity of the judicial control which is exercised on science-based measure? As you know, each jurisdiction has its own, at least in the European Union, In risk regulation, the choice of a standard decides the level of scientific involvement required from a court, and there are a lot of relevant questions that we have to ask. Has the science been taken into account? Is the final measure based on the science? Or should we go further and asking whether the underlying science is reliable or plausible? This, of course, is a standard review which would be more intrusive. Is it valid? This, of course, would lead even to second-guess the science. So we have basically a de novo review, which is one of the possibilities at the end of one spectrum, and at the other end of the spectrum we have total deference. What is the European standard review? We don't really have a textual reference in the treaty. The idea is that since there's a normative vacuum, the courts themselves have to fill it up. And the case law originally developed a differential approach vis-à-vis European members, and now European members are more and more scrutinized. So the idea, if you look at the BSC line of judgments, where many actions adopted at the European level against BSC were adopted and were challenged, the EU said that only a manifest error or a misuse of power, or whether the Commission did not clearly exceed the bounds of discretion, has to be the right standard review. So quite differential. But things are changing a little bit. If you look at Angela Farm, this case I mentioned about the hair loss tonic, which was banned by the Commission, the court said that it was not found scientific and technical assessment, which must themselves be based on the result of the latest international research. So there is an idea that there must be some rational relationship between the final adopted measure and the scientific basis for that measure. At the same time, the court recognized some wider discretion when the assessment that is made is complex. So where a community authority is required to make complex assessments, then it has to enjoy some discretion. We cannot, however, accept the novel review. It is true that the judicial review is limited, but still we have to check the accuracy of the findings of the fact and the law. This seems to be the approach taken by the Court of Justice in Abjo. If the novel review has been rejected, the community institutions are required to undertake a scientific risk assessment. So risk assessment has become a duty because it has been codified in the treaty, but it has been very much developed by the case law of the court. Risk assessment as a procedural duty is one good example drawn from Pfizer, and that's exactly where I would like to stop. So I thank you all for your attention and wish you good luck.
Thank you for Professor Alamo. It was a very concise and general picture about how European Union run the risk analysis system. Especially, he gave us an idea whether risk management should be based on science and based on evidence. However, he also underlined some uncertainty in doing the risk assessment. So I think it also reminds us the importance of the relationship or collaboration between risk assessor and risk management. Of course, later we have more time to discuss about that. Now it's my great pleasure to welcome Mr. Valaro up here. His topic is shared experience about EFSA risk communication guidelines, especially from a company perspective. And because the food companies, they produce food, and sometimes there is a problem. So, but the problem is how we properly allow the voice and have a community on mutual basis. And so I think that this experience sharing can give us some guidelines and help us to build up a better risk communication between risk assessors, management, and other stakeholders. Let's give him a very warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lee, for the introduction. I would really thank you all the people that made this conference possible and invite me here. It's a great pleasure. It's my first time in Taiwan, and since now it's a perfect staying. I love the people, I love the food, I love the country, so it's really nice and interesting to be here. Just a couple of words about my activity, because I am a lawyer, but don't think as me as the lawyer who stands in the court. Most of the time I give consultancy to the companies in taking their critical decisions. So if they have to activate a food recall or not, how they have to communicate during crisis, how they can mitigate the problems that any company has. And on the other side, I participate in this impact assessment activity very often for the European Commission as external expert. You saw that they outsource sometimes the impact assessment procedures, at least some phases. So I know very well how the things work on both sides. And my advice is really independent advice. So I work with the competent authorities as well with the companies. With a very cooperative approach, trying always to mitigate and imitate the problems. So, just a few general remarks about the sectorial legislation. Okay? We learn from the Alberto Alemanno's video that risk assessment, risk analysis is not in the treaty of the European Union, but is defined in the sectorial legislation. You see in this regulation, which is our founding stone of food law, you can find in the definitions some reference to the risk analysis, which is again a process made by three interconnected components: risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. Today we will focus then on the definition of risk communication. But it's very important to understand how the European Union is structured at union level, but also its relationships with the member states also, because that's where the problems lie in the end. At European level, risk assessment, risk management functions are well divided. The European Food Safety Authority, which is made by scientists and is independent advisory body, to the risk assessment is defined in the general food law. The risk management is done by the European Commission, and this separate model is intended to protect the scientific body from political pressure. It makes sense because from one side, scientists have to assess the hazard and the risk, and politicians have to decide how to intervene in the market because they can take decisions that impact very strongly on international trade, on a country economy, on a sector of the economy. So that makes sense. On the other side, it's better that the two functions are divided to avoid any pressure on the scientific part of the risk analysis. And that's very, very important. Scientists have to tell us precisely what the risk is and what we can do to mitigate this risk without any filter or conditioning from the outside. But this model is not adopted in the same structure in all the member states. In Italy, for instance, all these three functions are up to the Ministry of Health. An internal branch of the Ministry of Health perform the risk assessment, but we are still in the same authorities. And the structure can vary very much in the 28 member states of the European Union. The new members are adopting a separate model, but it's not the same in the old members like Italy. The risk management is performed also with this instrument, the Rapid Alert System for Food and Feed. Probably some of you know what it is. It's a network of competent authorities, an informative network made by computers, emails, open 24/7, every day, night and day. It is a risk management tool. It's made to allow the authorities to trace back immediately any dangerous product and to mitigate the consequence of any food safety risk that may arise on the market. But also in this case, it is well regulated in the general food law, but it lacks of any legal reference to the risk communication phase, because as you may imagine, the system is for the public authorities. It's not like the FDA system in the United States, where we have many information for consumers, like the picture of the product, where it's sold, the list of the shops where you can find this product. This information in Europe are confidential. You can go on the RASP, but you can simply see that there is chicken with salmonella from Italy or from Poland, and is distributed also in France, Germany, Belgium. Stop. You cannot have more precise information. Sometimes some information about the quantity, the level of pesticides, the level of the pathogens found in the food, but nothing related to the company or the product. So the authorities, in case of emergency, in case of real risk for consumers, can communicate. But how they can communicate, what they can communicate is not regulated. And that opens hundreds of problems, because each member state has its own procedures, or in some cases they don't have procedures. And so it's not clear when a risk will be communicated to consumers and when it's not. And that's creates confusion and mistrust in consumers. That's why now in this better regulation agenda, the RASP system and the general food law itself are under revision. It's been just published yesterday, a report on this one. So we lack a risk communication regulation. We don't have any law speaking of the risk communication. The risk communication is not clearly allocated as well. It's a shared responsibility, as outlined in the precedent in the former video, between EFSA and the European Commission, but we cannot forget the member state because of the rapid alert system, because often member states communicate. They communicate often referring to a single case on the market, but a